All right, cool. So we are gonna go have a quick crash course in React. So I'm gonna make a fresh folder as well. Let's go into, make sure that's closed. I'm gonna make a new folder called new React app. And I'm gonna go into this new folder. So if you're all doing this along with me, you probably already have your fresh folder. What we're gonna do first is we're gonna run one of the most important commands that you'll want to remember when it comes to making apps. It's npm create vite at latest. And let me know if my text is too small on either screen. Am I sharing? I don't see the green bar.
You're sharing your screen.
Okay, cool. So this command allows us to use vite, which is French for fast, to quickly scaffold a React app. Not really just any React app, but a lot of different types of apps, actually. So the first thing it's going to do with its interactive wizard is ask you for a project name. So let's just call this React demo. And then it's going to ask you for a framework. I haven't tried any of these other ones, but for now, all we want is React. And then it's going to ask you for a variant. If you like TypeScript, you have the option, but we're going to go with JavaScript for now. And then it's going to ask you to change directory into your newly created React folder. And then you're going to want to run the second most important command, npm install. While vite will remind you to run npm install after you create a new project, vite will not be there to remind you to do this when you fork or clone an existing project from GitHub. So every time you do that, just remember to run npm install first. npm install is like the equivalent to pip install -r requirements.txt for Python applications. Instead, npm install is for Node applications. Once you have that, you should be able to run npm run dev, the third command that you will want to have memorized for React applications. This spins up your React app. And if you all click into the link that generated on your terminal, you should be able to see a React app, which is very interactive. It's very reactive. And something else you'll want to do when working in React is to open up your, what is this thing called? I forget what this is called, your dev console, I believe. And you could use different parts of the dev console, like this highlighter up here, to highlight different elements that have been rendered in your HTML. Very useful for debugging. Clicking on something will show you the elements, where it is in the HTML that's been built out. You could see console logs and errors. So because we're writing in JavaScript, we're able to use console log to guide us through our code. You could even use the second button up here to emulate working on a mobile device. So now my mouse has turned into a little, I guess, digital finger to swipe and move things around, and you can still interact with things as so. And you could also adjust in case you were designing for a very specific device, like a tablet, for example. So really cool stuff. Working in React is awesome because you get to see all of your changes live. So let's actually do that. Let's hop into, I'm going to open this other terminal here. I'm going to see if it takes me to the right folder. Yep. This alias I have, by the way, J, it is mapped to this really cool Brew application called AutoJump. So as you navigate your local machine, AutoJump caches the locations that you've been to, and you could use J to quickly hop around to folders based on how frequently you go to them and how recently they've been visited. So I am now in the React demo folder, the same one that I just created for this app. I can now write PWD to show my working directory so that I could click on it and it'll take me to the right folder in my nav panel because I have way too much stuff to scroll through. And I can see inside of my app, I'm going to close this. I can see inside of my app.jsx. Is this right? This might not be the right folder. Hold on. Yes, I need to go to new React app. And then I want to go to this React demo folder. So now let's try this again. Make sure I'm in the right folder this time. If I go into my React app, I can go into source. That's where all of your source files are going to be. And if I go into my app.jsx, I could see everything in its original JSX syntax compared to what's here in my browser. So if I were to, let's say, get rid of this element here, and I save, my React SVG disappears. I'm going to get rid of my Vite SVG as well. And now all we have left are these elements. Have you gone over JSX at all? JSX is essentially like the offspring of JavaScript and HTML. So React is predominantly written in JavaScript, but the way that components work in React is that they all return JSX elements. So as you can see here, these elements are laid out just like HTML. In fact, we are using HTML elements. We have these opening fragments that will always require an equivalent closing fragment. You can open and close a fragment within the same wrapper if you don't need to wrap anything inside of it. So if I were to write, for example, like I just want to create a break, right? I don't need to write break with a closing element break. I could close it by using this / within the same forward, reverse, carets, whatever you call these, greater than, less than signs. So this is JSX syntax. Everything you do in React will really be, well, let me put it this way. React comprises of 3 key ingredients. You have components, state and props, and your JSX return expressions. With these 3 ingredients, you have everything you need to render an application in React. So here, this very first thing we see, this function app, it's a basic JavaScript function, but it's also the fundamental building block of React. It is a React component. In this line here, we have a variable set to a state, hence the useState function. useState is a built-in method in React for easily manipulating state. They essentially consist of the variable with a setter for that variable. And with that, we're able to easily manipulate the state of the variable. So we start count with a value of 0 when we have a fresh React app. So I just refresh my app, it's back to 0. And if we scroll through our JSX, we see that we have a button element here. This button element calls the count. And it also calls the set count method. So that whenever I click on this button, an anonymous function call will be called, and this function will basically call a set count method. And this set count method will update using the useState method to increment count by 1. So we see that count is turning into count plus 1. And that is how that state is being manipulated. Let's talk about child components. So right now we're dealing with one components, but we can, well, you'll really, just like with pretty much anything, you can't just have an app with one single component. That component will be way too big and monolithic. It'll be a nightmare editing that code. So we really want to be able to work around multiple applications or components within our application. So let's call this, I don't know, child component. I'm going to create a new component now so that we could demonstrate something else that's important about state. And that is that state is mutable, whereas props are not. So state is essentially how you record data in React. Props is data as well. Props is short for properties. But unlike state, props are immutable. You cannot directly modify a prop. This is important to remember, and this is important to know because the last key thing to remember about state is that state only exists within the component that it is defined in. So state is mutable, but really only mutable within its component because it can't exist outside of that component. In order to pass data around in React, you've got to pass properties. So this is a two-step process where you're basically sending the prop and then you're receiving the prop. So props is like a special keyword inside of React, and it's essentially an object. If we wanted to pass this state down to this child component, we can do so in one of two ways. The first way being by passing props. Now, if I were to write a return expression in here, and let's say I wanted to show the count, well, I first have to create some kind of wrapper, because in a JSX expression, everything needs to be wrapped in at least one HTML element. So here's my empty div. I'm now going to create a paragraph element, and I'm going to type count is count. Syntax for calling properties is essentially just curly brackets. Remember that. Like we have here in line 17, count is being called with curly brackets, but I'm going to comment this out and I'm going to save it. And now we can no longer see count inside of our browser. It's going to be down here instead. But before I can actually access this count value, because remember, state only exists within the component it's defined in, I have to pass it in as a prop. So I've done the first step of passing the prop, but now the second step is to receive it. So I'm essentially going to return that count using this prefix. So now that I've passed props, I have access to everything inside of app, every state, every function. All of that will belong to this props object. So let's save, let's refresh. It's still not rendering. Does anyone know why? Anyone want to take a guess?
Is it because you commented out 17?
Yes, that is one. Yes, that is part of it. And I moved it down here so that we could access it. But we're not actually quite calling child component yet. Child component might be returning this line so that it would render, but nothing is calling child component. So inside of my first component, I can now, within this JSX expression, call another component directly. I also just realized I kind of explained things a little wonky. This step down here, it's not receiving, or sorry, it's not passing the prop. This is all receiving the prop. This is where I pass the prop. So now that I've called the child component, before it could receive the prop, I have to tell it that I want to pass it the props. So in this specific example, I want to pass count. So I'm going to call a count value. I'm going to set it to count. Oops, sorry. I meant. Oh, I didn't close my fragment. So now that I've closed it, again, I could either do this, putting this / here, or I could also do with this a little more verbose way. If I had to, for example, put something in between these fragments. But since I don't, I'll just close it within the same set of arrows. So now that I'm passing count down to child component, it could receive this prop and it could use it. Any questions so far? And are you all trying this out on your local machines?
I'm trying to do it. It's just that after I did the steps where we choose React and later we choose a variant JavaScript, are we supposed to how you call it pull the whatever file you're using from like the GitHub?
Right now, I was just demoing everything straight from like a fresh React app. So everything here was generated by the Vite command. So when we saw inside here, npm create Vite latest, everything was created by this command. So would you like to share your screen so we could see where you're at?
Because after I ended up choosing the framework and then choosing the JavaScript, I tried running npm install and just gave me this.
Okay, let's see. Did you change directory into? Well, let me look a bit. So you're in React Crash. You called npm create. Oh, you're on Windows though, right?
Yes, but I'm using the Linux terminal, the WSL.
Okay. When you use the Vite command, you were inside the React Crash Course folder, and it should have created a new folder. So can you try? Yeah, that's weird.
I could try it again.
Okay.
But you did do a CD into your, because you have to, after you do the you select a variant, you have to change your directory into the project.
Okay. And for the project name, do I just name it whatever, or do you guys press enter?
Yeah, you can name it whatever.
You want the other one with SWC, right? That gives you JSX. Is that right, Julius?
Actually, what the SWC is. I don't use that one.
The instruction said JavaScript. I could do it again with the SWC.
Now you just have to, you're good. You don't have to. It's just, I think that gives you JSX, but now you just need to cross, CD into it.
It's saying that the operation's not permitted. You're not able to make. Oh, it looks like it's trying to make it inside your Windows directory. You see that?
Right here?
Yeah. So you're inside of your Ubuntu.
It should be inside, like, I guess, my VM for virtual machine or whatever, where my terminal is at.
But for some reason, it's trying to install it to Windows new project.
That's weird.
There might be a flag that we could pass in to the Vite npm create vite at latest so that we could define the what is it called? The path directly. So let's see. I'm gonna look this up real quick. Okay, so after you run npm create vite, try passing in a period / so that I'll create it within the directory that you're inside of. I'm gonna copy paste that into the Zoom chat.
So give it the path where I'm at
Mhm.
on the React REST. So it should be.
I think for a period / should be enough. It basically, that's what says in this directory that you're in right now.
Then you just go through the same process.
Mhm.
And would that just be answered for Windows, or should I just change it to Ubuntu?
I guess, yeah, Ubuntu. Is anybody else on Windows?
Pretty sure me and Steven are the only ones.
Oh, yeah, but he's out sick today.
Okay.
It's the same package name.
I
I
mean,
think
I could leave it how it is just to see what it does.
okay. Yeah, now you want to choose React. And let me look up what that SWC is.
Basically like a replacement for Babel.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Oh, do I go with the SWC or should I just go with the regular?
Either or. Node version 20.6.0 has like this incompatibility with Babel. So if you were using that exact version of Node, you'd probably want to use SWC.
Okay. Still giving me the same.
All right. Operation not permitted. So it's saying to unlink that directory. So there's a directory pointing to Windows. So I'm thinking this has something to do with how you have npm set up, your node package manager.
npm. I'm pretty sure I installed it. Because you're supposed to install it on the terminal, right?
Yeah, in Ubuntu.
Yes, I'm pretty sure I installed it into an exact same terminal, not in my command prompt or in my other terminals.
All right. Well, shoot, we could try to hop into a room and continue troubleshooting it after class, but I think we should maybe go back to trying to go through the rest of the React demo. How's that sound?
Sounds good.
Cool. Is anybody else having trouble getting React to run? Cool. All right. So we see that we can create multiple components inside of React. Components are essentially really just functions, they're methods. There are actually two kinds of components in React. There are function components and class components. Class components were the original style of components, and they are quite verbose. They require the use of lifecycle methods They require the use of a render function outside of your return. They're not fun. Even the official React devs say in their documentation to just write in function components. The only use case you really have for learning class components is when you're working with older applications that still use them. For the most part, everything that you want to do, you'll be able to write faster and more effectively with function components. And the second ingredient that we want to remember is state and props. State and props is data manipulation in React. States are mutable, whereas props are not. In order to update a prop, you have to update the state that it belongs to. So I can't just write a function that says set props.count to something. It would probably error out. Actually, yeah, let's demo that right now. Let's write a function. And let's create a button. Actually, I'll just make this button fresh. So I'm going to make a button. I'm going to call it handle change. This is how you can add functionality to things inside of JSX. So I'm passing in handle change as a prop to button. And within this prop, I am using my curly bracket notation to create an anonymous function call, this arrow function. And I'm going to have this do something like, I don't know, props.count equals a value. This should not work. I'm pretty sure it will not work. So let's close this button. Actually, no, we can't close it because we want to give it some kind of a text. And now we can close it. Save. I'm missing an initializer in my const declaration. I need my equal signs. So if I were to try and hit this button, well, maybe I shouldn't wrap it inside the other button. Let me comment this out and comment this out. I'm going to save. Count is no longer a button. I'm going to click on this and it's not going to do anything because we should not be able to change count. What I can do instead is I can pass another property down to the child component. And this time I'm going to pass the set count function. So set count equals curly brackets set count. Now that I've passed down the set count prop to, or the set count function as a prop to the child component, I can use that. I could use that function now, but I'm also looking at this and I'm thinking some really weird syntax. I really want to demonstrate just to further prove that this shouldn't work. Let's say props.count equals 1. Yes, this is actually what should be handle change. And this would be on click. My bad, y'all. But same thing, it shouldn't change the prop. In fact, it's erroring out. It's saying we cannot assign to the read-only property count because count is a prop, it's immutable. Now, to handle count as the state, we're going to use that set count function that we're passing down. And we're going to say on click, instead of calling the handle change function, we're going to call props.set count. And we're going to pass it similar to this value up here. We're going to pass it the existing count. With an arrow function pointing to props.count plus 1. And let me double check all my syntax here, because I'm pretty sure I have something that's not right. I'm also going to get rid of this because it's really annoying. Props validation is a pain in the ass. Okay, so now I'm going to call this a button that should work. And let's see if it works. Not quite yet. Oh, I'm getting some kind of really crazy error here. Something's happening. Can anyone catch what's going on before I can?
I think I see it because I got mine working.
Okay.
Your on click needs, after the curly braces, you need to set the anonymous function and then do props.set count. So your anonymous function, you'll have two actually. So you'll have one in front and one. There you go. There you go. Now that should work. I think.
Okay.
Oh, and you have to pass count into set. There you go. Just count.
Just count.
Yeah, that should work.
Interesting.
Let me see. You're just.
I might have some other uncaught error going on that's really freaking React out. So let me.
I'll put what I have in there, Julius.
Okay.
Mine is, I don't know, like for way mine is working, I'm getting 2 clicks, right? So I have 2 buttons. I have a button with a button, so it actually goes up twice.
Okay. Cool.
So,
you actually want to share your screen?
Yeah. I don't necessarily know if this is like ideal, but it's kind of cool. All right. You guys getting my VS Code?
Yep.
Sorry. So we got it's actually like if you click up here, there's one button, but then the other button's right here. So it's actually hitting both.
Okay.
My
Yeah,
code.
I think it's because let's go back to your parent component.
All right, sorry, I always get the Zoom thing gets in the way of my VS Code and it drives me crazy. All right, so
yeah, I'll scroll up a bit. Let's go to where you're calling that child component. You're calling that child component within your button. So when you're clicking on it, you're clicking both the child component button and the button that it's wrapped inside.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, there's like a little button nested within there because if you get around the edges, you can even, you can actually see the other button there. That's why React is fun. But I just, I don't know why yours, because after you changed that, I feel like you had everything the same here.
Oh, that makes sense though. You wouldn't necessarily need
the
props.count inside that because you're okay reading the value of count, but cool.
I'll let you have it back.
Right on. All right, let's just gain my bearings here. Zoom always auto full screens.
Or put stuff over where you're trying to manipulate. Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Pain. Okay, cool. So is mine still freaking out? Yep, every time I start it, it's uncaught something. I'm just gonna comment this out first off, and then I'm gonna maybe comment all of this out.
No close. No, there's a.
Yeah, I'm missing something somewhere. I'm gonna close this. Yeah, I don't know what the hell happened there. Cool. All right, so that covers components, state and props, and JSX. One last thing I want to run you all through before we get started. One of the challenges is conditional rendering. Something else that's really cool in React is how easy it is to implement conditional rendering. So let's say, for whatever reason, I wanted this child component to only appear while I have count at a certain value. I could use a ternary to do this. So let's take this child component, let's wrap it inside some curly brackets, and let's create a conditional. This conditional is basically going to say, if a value is true, then render the child component. If it's false, don't render the child component. So if you're unfamiliar with ternaries are very simple one-line conditionals. So my condition is going to be based off count. Is count less than or equal 10? Question mark. If it is, then I'm going to have my child component render, and then I'm going to use a colon to separate the true outcome from the false outcome. And my false outcome is just going to be, I don't know, let's just create a paragraph element and say, bye. So now, if we hit this button and we increase, let me make sure I saved first, of course. As we increase count, once we reach 11, this should disappear. Does that make sense? Cool. So that is my React crash course. I think the most important things to cover in React, again, are the importance of components, how basically everything in React is built out of components, state and props, how that's essentially all data is in React, and the JSX return expression, which is how we convert our JavaScript into HTML for the DOM to render. We then covered a bit of conditional rendering, and now we have a few challenges that y'all can work on. Got a very simple to-do app. Oh, right, I've got to make these for you. I'll make them in a sec after this, but let's look over it really quick. No. One of these will be it. Here we go. It's called Echo Platoon New. So the simple React to-do list is you're going to make a to-do list component that serves as the main container for your application. It's going to be able to create a list of tasks, to-do items, and we're going to use HTML to provide an input field for users to input new tasks. And you should be able to mark a task as complete, at which point it will disappear forever. And the second challenge is to create a very basic panel app. This app will utilize conditional rendering, ternaries, to open and close a panel based on whether it has an is open state set to true, which you're going to be able to toggle by clicking on a button. Any questions? Cool. If you happen to finish both of these challenges, take a shot at using your newfound React skills to create a front end for your full stack application, because tomorrow Chandra will be demonstrating a very simple deployment to AWS with your full stack application. Let's cut the recording and I'll set up some breakout rooms.